welcome back to the Great Travel Warriors of Bharat monthly series. In this August episode, we're going to look into one of the most controversial movements of the Indian freedom struggle, the Quit India movement. It was launched on 8th of August 1942, and we have always been told that it's thanks to this movement that India received independence in 1947. Is this true? Well, in the past few days, you might have come across lots of posts on social media and even in the national media which has questioned this from every possible angle. This video is not intended to give fuel to any of those controversies. Instead, we are going to look into the contributions of 3 tribal leaders who actively participated in the Quit India movement. We're going to look at what became of their lives as a result of their participation in this movement. And then I'm going to leave it to you to decide whether the Quit India movement was indeed as impactful as it has always been made out to be. Here we go. Couple of things to know about the Quit India movement before we move forward. One, it was launched on the 8th of August 1942, and on the 9th of August, the very next day, all the top Congress leaders were arrested by the police and put behind bars as a precautionary measure. So with the top leadership gone, the masses were left to themselves, their good senses, and whoever Congress leader was left behind to look up to and carry forward the movement. 2. In absence of anything specific as to how to get the British to quit India, people did so by resorting to intense sloganeering, picketing and raiding of shops, and carrying of police stations and government offices, ultimately leading to hoisting of the Congress tricolour atop these places and court arrest. So this is how the movement eventually rolled out. Whether or not this was a success, we will come to a conclusion to that by looking into the contributions of 3 indigenous community leaders. Dashriben Choudhury from Bardoli, Gujarat, Putalimaya Devi Tamang from Kurseong, West Bengal, and Laxman Naik from Mathili, in Odisha. Let's get started now. In Bardoli, the teenager Dashriben Choudhury led a group of 5,000 people to the police station with the intention of hoisting the tricolour. However, they were intercepted well before they could reach the place, and Dashri was arrested and sent to the Yerawada jail. She remained imprisoned for a very long time, and by the time she came out, the freedom struggle had taken a totally different turn and had nothing to do with the intentions of the Congress. In Kurseong on the 12th of August 1942, Sarju Prasad Pudar had led the Quit India movement. He was leading a march of 1,000 people along the streets of Kurseong, and they were creating a ruckus. He was, as expected, arrested by the police, and they thought that the movement had come to an end with that quite successfully. That was not to be. The very next day, Putalimaya Devi Tamang, who later on went to become the wife of Sarju Prasad Pudar, Putalimaya Devi Tamang ji organized a fresh march, and she too was arrested, and all these people were sent to the Darjeeling jail, where they were asked to sign a paper that stated that they are not going to participate anymore in these kinds of activities. All of them refused to do so, and then they were treated like ordinary criminals instead of being treated as political criminals, and they were lodged in jail indefinitely. However, due to the failing health of both Sarju Prasad Pudar and Putalimaya Devi Tamang, within a space of few months between them, they were released from jail. Laxman Naik is known as the man who brought Quit India to the state of Orissa. He was a mustadar, alternately known as the village headman of the village Tentuligama, and he was also a very active Congress worker. Since a very long time, he had been advocating for his tribesmen to disobey the British laws that wanted them to pay heavy taxes, extra taxes, get into unreasonable labor, unpaid labor, and also work towards their own self-improvement. So obviously this was unacceptable to both the princely state, Jaipur, under which they came, and also the British administration. So both of them already had a lot of grudges against Laxman Naik. So when Quit India was announced, both sides knew that this man was going to be up to something, and they better be prepared to deal with it. So Laxman Naik also was aware that They are going to be up in the arms to get him, but he was not going to give up either. His program for his tribesmen was set for the date of 21st August 1942, and it was that in the morning of that day at around 9:30, they would all be marching towards the Mathili police station and they would hoist the tricolor. So on the appointed date and time, they all set out, and as they were marching, amidst chants of Ramdhun and slogans like "Swaraj has come," "Down with the British government," "The King of Jaipur is dead," and so on, they started their march. But just as they had started, they ran into a police patrol party which gave them a very severe dressing down and asked them to disperse. But obviously, the demonstrators were not going to do that. They merely waited for the patrol party to go away, waited for half an hour more, and then they continued their march towards the police station. This time, the magistrate Mujibur Rahman ordered a lathi charge of the people who had marched in. Obviously, violence broke out. Even though Laxman Naik had said that even if the police beat us, we will not raise a hand on them, still violence broke out. The demonstrators broke the bamboo fence that was surrounding the police station and went inside. Two of them ultimately reaching the top of the police station and nearly succeeding in hoisting the tricolor, but they were shot down, dead. And so the violence continued. It turned bad and then went to worse. And as the violence progressed, a lot of the people obviously ran away to save their lives. So many, however, were critically injured and at least 5 died. Laxman Naik was mercilessly beaten by the police. He was dragged by his hair and his mustache was set to fire, and he was left for dead inside a pit. Many hours later, when he gained consciousness, he could somehow make his way to the home of another Congress worker who advised him to escape to his village Tentuligaba and stay there until further instructions were received. And he did that. Now, unknown to all these Congress workers and tribesmen, what happened was that a forest guard by the name Ramaya had also ended up becoming a part of this march demonstration. And he was an opium addict. He had absolutely nothing to do with the protesters, demonstrators, but he ended up being there. He was drunk and he somehow ended up being there, and he got killed. Now the police and the King of Jaipur saw this as an excellent opportunity to frame Laxman Naik and get rid of him. So an arrest warrant was issued in his name, and he was declared as the murderer of this forest guard Ramaya. After an intense manhunt on the 2nd of September 1942, Laxman Naik was arrested and he was presented before the judge, who pronounced him as guilty and it declared him as the murderer of Ramaya, and he was sent to jail. So first they were brought to the Mathili police station where they were brutally tortured. He was caught along with his friend Balram Pujari, and but the main culprit was Laxman Naik in the eyes of the British. But both of them were tortured before being presented before the judge, and then the judge transferred them to the Koraput jail for an additional sessions judge appearance. Here again the proceedings went against them, and on the 18th of September they were declared once and for all again that Laxman Naik was the murderer and Balram Pujari was, though not the murderer, but still he had a very important role to play in bringing about all that violence. So both of them were going to be imprisoned, with Laxman Naik being given the sentence of death by hanging. Of course, this death sentence was appealed to at the Patna High Court, but unfortunately the judge was convinced that the charges brought against Laxman Naik are actually true, and so he reconfirmed the statement on the 13th of January 1943, and it was decided that on the 29th of March at morning 4 o'clock the sentence would be carried out. Now, I could of course bring in more examples of how the many other leaders of indigenous communities had taken part in Quit India movement, but unfortunately all of their stories have this kind of a similarity, and it is very heartbreaking. What's even worse is that it gives you a sense of feeling that all their efforts just went waste, though it's actually not the case. They did their best under the circumstances. But as a whole, when you look at the movement, what the Quit India movement really ended up giving the people is a British government that had become even more tyrannous in its approach. They started terrorizing people. They started levying such heavy taxes that people had to sell off their land and property to be able to pay those taxes. And because of this, they started gradually withdrawing from the movement. They started moving away and really not knowing what to do. So they just stopped, and the movement died a very unnatural death, and a rather meaningless one, giving us this impression that all the sacrifices of all these leaders have gone to waste. Also, the Congress party was pressurized by both the British and also the princely states, like in this case the King of Jaipur, to withdraw and change itself. And the party realized that it has to realign itself, and so it beat a retreat. So now it's up to you to decide whether or not the Quit India movement had any significant impact in bringing independence to our country, and that too in 1947, as early as that.